Welcome back to the book review. Today, we are taking on a huge stack of sources to distill the history of something that feels, well, almost mundane.
The focus group.
Exactly, the focus group, and what seems like a simple marketing tool, actually has this profound and really surprising history. It shaped everything from World War II propaganda to the products in your pantry.
Right? And our mission for this book review is to trace the evolution of what you could call this whole culture of consultation. We're going to see how it moves from academic theory, serving the state,
To corporations.
to corporations trying to bridge this huge gap between the elites and the consumer, and then finally into a political tool.
And this whole journey gets at a central paradox we really need to keep in our minds.
Yeah. That focus groups have allowed the voices of ordinary people to be listened to be analyzed more than ever. But this has all happened while the actual political and economic power of those same people has, well, gone down.
The more they listen, the less power you seem to have. It's a fascinating tension.
It really is.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. And if you think the focus group was born in some slick Madison Ave office, you gotta think again. We're going back to Columbia University, early 1940s, and two sociologists, Paul Lazarsfeld and Robert K. Merton. This is the real origin.
And the context is everything. This was not about selling soap. This was war work.
War work.
Yeah. The Roosevelt administration and the Office of War Information, the OWI, they needed to test and refine their propaganda. Remember, Americans were not eager to jump into another war.
So the government needed a massive campaign of persuasion.
A huge one. And Lazarsfeld, he was already a pioneer here. He developed this really groundbreaking technology for radio program.
The Lazarsfeld Stanton Program Analyzer. It sounds so official.
It was. Listeners would push buttons to signal what they liked or disliked in real time. Very cutting-edge stuff.
But there's a big problem, right? The buttons only show you what they like.
Yeah, exactly. Not why. And that's the gap Merton fills with what he called the focused interview. It's a qualitative method designed specifically to probe the reasons, the emotions, the context behind the button he pushes.
Because the simple data, that can lead you way off track.
Completely. And their early findings were so counterintuitive. One of their first jobs was testing propaganda to motivate Americans to fight the Nazis.
Okay, and the logical approach would be
The logical approach which the OWI took was to portray the Nazis as unbelievably brutal, just bloodthirsty monsters. The idea was that fear and outrage would drive war support.
makes sense.
Except it failed spectacularly. It didn't make Americans want to fight. It actually made them feel powerless and too frightened to support the war at all. They just recoiled.
So what did they do? What was the pivot?
Well, the research showed they had to stop focusing on the enemy's brutality and start focusing on superior American values.
Democracy, rationality, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They had to sell the war by defending a better way of life, not just by showing horror. And this really sets the tone for the entire history of the focus group.
How so?
It was born as a precision tool for political elites who believed they needed this kind of scientific research to guide the masses into consenting to their plans.
But after World War II, that all changes. The money. It dries up.
The federal funding dries up. And these academics, while they follow the money, and the money was in corporate America.
And so the focus group pivots right along with them.
And that post-war moment created this giant psychological problem for businesses. Americans had spent years in a culture of sacrifice and austerity, make do and mend.
And now companies needed to reverse that entire mindset.
They had to get people buying again, buying new shiny things. This created the perfect opening for psychological research.
And this is where Ernest Dichter comes in. He's this Austrian motivational researcher who basically creates a guilt cartography of the mid-century consumer.
A guilt cartography. I like that he takes the focused interview, adds heavy dose of Adlerian psychology, and just turns it into Madison Ave. Gold.
The classic example has to be the Betty Crocker cake mix.
Oh, absolutely. The company knew the product was great, it was easy, it was delicious, but sales were flat.
Because housewives felt guilty.
Yes, Dichter's groups revealed that the total convenience felt like they weren't doing enough for their families. It was almost like cheating.
So what was Dichter's brilliant solution?
So simple, so brilliant. You assuaged the guilt by forcing them to participate just a little.
You make them out of fresh egg.
You make them out of fresh egg. It gave them that sense of participation, and sales just took off. It proved that the emotional why was way more important than the functional how.
And this psychoanalytic stuff was everywhere in the 50s.
Oh, yeah. Dichter's methods got pretty elaborate. Rorschach tests, deep interviews. He'd match personality types to products.
It's like aggressive types like Lucky Strike cigarettes.
That's one of the famous findings. Yeah. Based on the stark high contrast packaging.
And the guilt mapping wasn't just about baking. Herta Herzog, who was Dichter's student and also Lazarsfeld's wife.
A key figure. She did early research on laundry services and found, again, women felt deeply guilty about sending their wash out. They felt they needed a major emergency to justify it.
Okay, but this is where it gets kind of dark.
It gets very cynical. Herzog's findings led to a pretty unsettling suggestion,
Which was
that the laundry service should send promotional letters to recently bereaved households.
wait, targeting people who just had a death in the family?
Yes, because that was a moment when their guilt would be neutralized by the necessity of the service.
That is profoundly cynical. It shows how fast this tool could be twisted to exploit people's vulnerabilities for profit.
It really does. It's not just a listening tool. It's an emotional scalpel.
And the corporate world desperately needed that scalpel because the decision makers, who were overwhelmingly white and male, were just so disconnected from ordinary America.
Totally. When your C-suite doesn't look like your audience, you have to buy insight. Take Revlon in the 1990s.
Okay,
They're testing an ad for a hair relaxer, Cream of Nature with African American women, and the women in the groups flagged issues right away.
of issues.
They found the Revlon name itself off-putting. They called it a big white company, and they felt alienated by the models who they described as white-looking supermodels.
So Revlon listened.
To their credit. Yes, they changed the campaign, used models with more color diversity, and they downplayed the Revlon branding. The product was a hit, a clear win for listening.
And this disconnect wasn't just about race or gender. It was geographic, too.
Absolutely. There's a great example of an ad campaign for margarine that was built around these complex opera metaphor.
Opera metaphors for margarine.
The creative team in New York thought it was brilliant, witty, sophisticated.
But I'm guessing people in Kansas.
People in Kansas and other Midwestern cities were just confused. They'd say, "We don't understand this. What does opera have to do with margarine?" The cultural snobbery was just laid bare.
And that snobbery was often compounded by, well, gender prejudice. There's that incredible story about the dish soap focus group.
Oh, from the 1950s. The male moderator, Dr. S., he just refused to believe what the women were telling him.
He kept insisting that all women were anxious to keep their hands beautiful.
Right? But none of them were talking about manicures or rubber gloves. And the women, they were having none of it. They shot back that they were too busy with houseworking kids.
1,000 things to do.
Exactly one woman just snapped. "You just don't have time to worry about hands." But Dr. S., he's stubborn. He just says, "I don't believe that."
That gap in understanding is precisely why the focus group existed.
It forces the elite to confront the reality of the consumer's life. But what's so fascinating is that even with a biased moderator, the industry needed the information too badly to just ignore it.
So even if the admin were contemptuous, do you speak moron like in Mad Men?
Right? Even with that contempt, the process ultimately positioned the female consumer as a kind of powerful, savvy expert. Her domestic knowledge was essential, even if the elites hated having to ask for it.
So they're listening. But the power is still with the company. And that tension, the contempt versus the necessity, it fuels some amazing stories when things go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And when things fail, the focus group becomes the perfect scapegoat.
The Ford Edsel 1957, the most famous failure ever blamed on market research.
It was preceded by tons of research. And when it just completely flopped,
The grill looked like a toilet seat, people said.
Right? So everyone immediately blamed the motivational mumbo-jumbo. The researchers. That's the story. We all know that.
It's the story, but it's a carefully cultivated myth. Yeah, the executives mostly ignored the research. Consumers hated the name Edsel. They said it sounded like Weasel Management used it anyway. And more importantly, the car was just a lemon. About half of the early ones were defective.
So why blame the research if the product was just bad?
Because it was better for corporate America to nurture that myth. Let them avoid charges of, consumer manipulation. And it reaffirmed the idea that the consumer is king. It protected the whole ideology of consumer sovereignty.
Instead of just admitting they made a terrible car. A similar thing happened with a new Coke, right, in 1985.
In a perfect parallel. The public backlash was volcanic. We know the numbers. 40,000 letters, 1,500 angry calls a day.
The famous call saying changing Coke is like God making the grass purple.
That's the one. And top company officials claimed the research failed. They said the groups just couldn't measure the profound feelings people had for the old brand.
They said they asked the wrong questions, but the reality is way more nuanced. The focus groups did foreshadow the resistance. It wasn't about wrong questions, it was about ignoring the social dynamics in the room.
What do you mean?
Researchers noted that one or two really vocal, passionate dissenters could sway the entire group. They saw it happen. Young women would literally change their opinions based on what these two other girls were saying.
A kind of real-world social influence right there in the room.
Exactly. The nuance was in the data, but it was dismissed. It was just easier to blame the tool than to admit you made a bad call.
Which is a perfect bridge if corporate execs learn to ignore or blame research. What did politicians learn to do with it?
Well, the political world really embraced the focus group in the 1980s. But for consultants, it wasn't a tool for shaping policy. It was a tool for packaging it.
Finding the right words.
Precisely. Consultants like Frank Luntz working for Reagan, they weren't trying to change the policy. They were mining the groups for the right rhetoric, finding words like family and freedom to frame decisions that were already made.
On the other side, Democratic pollsters like Stanley Greenberg became these emotion hunters.
That's a great term for it. He was looking for the most visceral feelings. He found that in one New Jersey group, people cared way more passionately about the environment, toxic waste, fear of death, than they did about, say, car insurance.
That tells you where the emotional leverage is.
It tells you where the passion is. And Bill Clinton mastered this. He used focus groups relentlessly to basically pull phrases right out of ordinary people's mouths and put them into his own speeches.
I read his pollster was running groups up to twice a night in the '92 campaign.
Twice a night. It's a level of hyper-consultation that was just unheard of. And that intensity kind of leads us to the final messy stage of this whole history, the move into the digital age.
Where the whole idea of an authentic voice gets really complicated.
Very. One of the big anxieties for market researchers now is the professional respondent.
People who do it just for the money.
Exactly. They lie about their habits, their identity, just to qualify for more groups. A journalist confessed to pretending to be a hardy adventurer who'd backpacked through Mongolia for one study.
And then what?
And then a profuse sweater for a deodorant group the same week.
That's a fundamental threat to the whole idea. The whole myth is that you're getting an authentic average voice.
But if you're just getting paid experts gaming the system, it challenges the entire premise.
And yet, ironically, some researchers are saying this matters less than we think.
Yeah, because cultural fragmentation might be shrinking. As one researcher put it, we have the same stores and the same malls all over the country. Basically, everyone has more or less the same relationship to Starbucks.
We're more homogenized than we like to think.
In many ways, yes. But the real culmination of this whole history, the biggest focus group ever invented, is the internet.
Big data, social media.
It provides exponentially more information in real time than a dozen people in a room ever could. We've moved into an age where we are providing free labor for elites.
We give our opinions away for free on Yelp, on Twitter, on review sites.
Companies don't have to pay for an hour of your time when they can track millions of your data points for free.
The 2012 Obama campaign is the perfect example of this. They used analytics to track every single potential voter, micro-targeting them, running a national campaign like a local ward campaign.
They knew what you cared about and how to talk to you about it. It's the ultimate irony. Someone called social media the biggest focus group someone could ever imagine.
So this culture of consultation is everywhere. We are constantly being listened to, tracked, categorized.
And yet people feel less empowered, more politically frustrated. In the end, the focus group, physical or digital, becomes this kind of ritual. It's a performance to show that elites are listening.
Without them ever having to actually give up any power.
Exactly.
So we've traced this whole journey from wartime necessity through the consumer psychiatry of the 50s to political messaging, and now to just widespread data harvesting.
And yet, despite all the critics, people like Steve Jobs who famously hated them, the traditional focus group is still around.
Why is that?
Because face-to-face conversation still gives you these unpredictable, valuable insights that an algorithm can sometimes miss.
Right? You can't capture the nuance of those women in the dish subgroup revolting against the moderator with a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
You can't. The method endures because it taps into something really fundamental, a human desire to share, discuss, cooperate.
So if this entire ritual is currently being used by elites to sell products and spin policies, maybe we should think about this. What if we learned from these consultation rituals and demanded real power for the majority?
Instead of just the performance of being heard? Something to consider the next time a company asks for your opinion.
Or the next time you give it away for free.
Exactly.
That's it for this book review. We'll see you next time.